Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into an Ottoman rosewater kitchen, well before sunrise, where the air is already shimmering with that soft, silky sweetness that makes you wonder if someone accidentally left a giant bottle of perfume open. The floor under your feet is cool stone, the kind that steals warmth from your toes, and somewhere deeper in the building, you hear a sleepy worker stifling a yawn that could honestly win awards for enthusiasm. You're about to help prepare one of the most prized scents of the empire, even though you probably won't survive the morning rush if you forget something as simple as trimming the fire too high. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, drop your location and the local time. You know I love seeing how many time zones gather here to fall asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the doorway a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The kitchen is technically a workshop, but it feels more like a temple devoted to scent. Copper pots gleam in the lamplight, their polished surfaces catching reflections of rose petals piled high in woven baskets. Every basket is filled with deep pink and soft blush petals collected only hours ago because Ottoman distillers insist the dawn harvest is the purest, one of the mainstream facts you'll hear whispered with priest-level seriousness around here. Too late in the day, they say, and the roses lose their soul. No pressure, of course. A senior worker waves you closer, silently pointing at a long wooden table. You drag your hand across the surface, feeling faint grains worn smooth by decades of use. Your first task is simple: observe. In Ottoman kitchens like this, apprentices weren't allowed to touch the stills until they proved they could handle petals without crushing them. Yes, really, historians still argue whether this was practical training or a slightly dramatic test to weed out clumsy beginners. You watch as one of the workers gently lifts a handful of petals, letting them rain down in a soft, whispery cascade. They smell fresh, slightly fruity, and slightly earthy. Nothing overpowering yet. The magic comes later. Heat radiates from the hearth nearby, where low flames flicker under a broad copper pot. The fire is tiny for now, a patient glow that suggests you are in the don't mess things up phase of the day. Ottoman rosewater kitchens were surprisingly calm this early, almost sleepy, except for the occasional clank of metal lids or the unmistakable sound of someone dropping a ladle and pretending they didn't. A quirky tradition unfolds before your eyes. A young apprentice lightly taps the baskets, 3 gentle knocks before moving them to the preparation zone. According to him, it wakes the rose's spirit. According to the head distiller, it just shakes out any insects having a late-night sleepover. You're free to choose which explanation your imagination prefers. Somewhere in the back, a kettle whistles for a moment, sharp, quick, impatient. You glance at it, and one of the workers mutters something about the copper complaining about the cold, which is either a charming joke or a warning that you should probably learn the kitchen's personality before it learns yours. You inhale again, deeper this time. The scent isn't strong yet, but it carries that early promise, like the first few seconds before your favorite song drops. And with that inhale, the slow pace of the kitchen starts to seep into your thoughts. Your shoulders drop. Your breath softens. You settle in. You move closer to the wooden table as the workers begin the most delicate part of the morning, sorting the petals. It sounds simple, like something a bored kid could do while watching cartoons, but in this kitchen, it carries the weight of a sacred ritual.
You're handed a shallow tray, cool and lightly dusted with rose pollen, and shown how to sift through the petals without bruising them. You pinch one lightly between your fingers and realize just how fragile it is, like holding a blush of air. The workers sort fast but gently, plucking out petals that look tired, wilted, or a little too enthusiastic about hosting beetles. A mainstream fact slips naturally into your thoughts. Ottoman rosewater was often made from a specific variety of damask roses, prized for their high oil content. The empire produced tons of this fragrant product each year, and kitchens like this one were part of a vast scented economy. As glamorous as that sounds, your current job is basically petal detective, and you're trying not to fail your first assignment. One of the older workers leans over and points at a petal with a tiny brown spot. You nod seriously, as if being taught a high-stakes medical procedure, and gently flick it into the discard bowl. He smiles the way someone smiles at a puppy trying to climb stairs, supportive, amused, and fully expecting you to mess up at least once. A quirky little rhythm fills the room. Every few minutes, someone claps dust off their hands, someone else hums an off-key tune, and another worker pokes the hearth to keep the fire steady. The heat grows slowly, and you feel it rising in gentle waves, warming your ankles first, then drifting upward. The hearth itself sits inside a brick alcove, glowing with that deep orange confidence of a fire that knows exactly what it's doing. You catch a quick side conversation between two workers, arguing, softly, sleepily, about whether the roses should be sorted clockwise or counterclockwise. Historians still argue whether this sort of ritualistic preference actually influenced the final product, or if it was simply another one of those charming, unnecessary traditions kitchens invented out of boredom. Either way, you pick clockwise, mostly because it feels more cinematic. Once your tray is full of perfect petals, a worker nods for you to bring it closer to the hearth. This is where things start getting real. You step forward into the warm glow and notice how the fire, still small, flickers with purpose, like it's aware the entire kitchen depends on its mood. One of the copper pots sits open, waiting like a sleepy giant about to be served breakfast. The distiller pours a ladle of water into its belly, and the steam that rises carries a faint sweetness. You add your tray of petals to the growing pile nearby. They'll be loaded into the pot soon, but first comes the coiling of the fire. You squat down and watch the hearth from a closer angle. Flames lick the base of the pot, painting gentle shadows across the brick. Medieval and early modern kitchens all relied on this exact same kind of fire. No knobs to turn, no gauges to check, just intuition and a lifetime of watching wood burn. You feel a wave of respect for anyone whose whole job depended on understanding heat by sight alone. Meanwhile, you barely trust yourself around a toaster. A soft thunk pulls your attention to the opposite side of the room. An apprentice is stacking rose stems, leftovers from the harvest, and muttering a quick blessing under his breath. He says it helps keep the scent pure. Another worker rolls his eyes and whispers that the stems are just used to start the next fire, because they burn fast. You smile. Both explanations can be true in a sleepy kitchen like this one. Finally, your supervisor gestures you toward the pot again. The petals are ready. The fire is ready. The entire room shifts into a slower, more focused rhythm. This is where sorting ends and the real transformation begins.
You step even closer to the copper still, feeling its gentle warmth settle onto your skin like a soft blanket. The workers begin transferring the sorted petals into the broad pot, and you watch the delicate piles collapse into each other with a sound so faint you almost imagine it, a tiny sigh of roses beginning their transformation. You lean in, and the first real wave of scent reaches you. Still soft, still watery, but unmistakably floral. It's the smell of something promising to become more than itself. The master distiller, an older man with the calmest eyebrows you've ever seen, takes his place beside you. He taps the rim of the pot with the back of a ladle, a quick metallic note that serves as his signal. Time to close the lid. You help lower the heavy copper top, steadying it as it slides into its groove. It fits perfectly, the way antique machinery always seems to fit when crafted by people who had centuries to perfect one thing. An Ottoman distillation technique drifts into your mind. Ottoman distillation techniques were considered some of the finest in the early modern world. Their copper craftsmanship was so precise that European travelers often compared the empire's stills to musical instruments, beautiful, balanced, and made to last. You look at this one now, humming faintly as the heat rises, and you understand the comparison instantly. Heat gathers slowly. The fire, now fed with split logs and a few dried stems from earlier, burns with a steady, confident glow. The pot begins to thrum softly, and the air warms enough to make the room feel wrapped in a scented cloak. You squat down to check the hearth again, trying to read the flames the way the workers do. A younger apprentice whispers, "If the flame dances too high, the roses get angry." You don't know whether he's joking or fully committed to rose diplomacy, but you nod anyway, always safer to agree with kitchen folklore. Then comes the copper coil, the serpentine tube stretching from the pot into a waiting jar. Watching it feels strangely hypnotic, like staring at a curling line drawn in one graceful motion. You run your fingers lightly along the cool metal, half expecting it to vibrate beneath your touch. The distiller gestures at the coil's end and whispers, "Now we wait." Waiting, however, doesn't mean idling. Workers shuffle quietly through their tasks, wiping down counters, stirring other pots, adjusting ceramic jugs, and throwing the occasional fond side-eye at the fire, as if daring it to misbehave. You're handed a tall, slender dipper and instructed to keep an eye on the pot's lid. If too much steam escapes from the edges, gently tap the rim. Copper responds well to confidence, they say, and you hope that extends to you. Then, at last, the first droplet forms. It swells at the coil's tip, hesitating, a tiny globe of liquid gathering itself for a grand debut. You lean close, but not too close. You learned from the earlier kettle that kitchen metal has opinions. The drop falls into the jar with a soft plink, followed by another, then another, slowly forming a rhythm. You find yourself relaxing to the sound, almost lulled by the tiny, consistent melody of rosewater being born. A quirky tidbit from the master distiller slips into the air as he leans over you. He claims expert distillers could judge rose quality by listening to the first 20 drops, each one carrying a slightly different tone. You try listening now, tilting your head like a very earnest pigeon, but all you hear is plink, plink, plink. He chuckles, and you're pretty sure he's humoring you, but the moment feels charming anyway. Meanwhile, the jar slowly fills with a clear, shimmering liquid. You swirl it gently, amazed by how something that smells so strong later begins so subtly now. Some artisans believed the earliest drops were the soul of the rosewater, rare, potent, and sometimes bottled separately for medicine or ritual use. Historians still argue whether this distinction was based on chemistry or superstition, but regardless, the kitchen treats the first jar like a quiet little treasure. The coil warms under your hand now, and you step back to give the workers room. They move with slow, practiced ease, rotating jars, adjusting the fire, and murmuring updates. The whole room feels like one. The jar beneath the copper coil grows heavier in your hands, warm at the base where the newest droplets land. You lift it carefully, keeping your movements slow, because everyone in this kitchen behaves as if sudden gestures might startle the rosewater back into vapor. A worker hands you a fresh, empty jar,
thin, slightly cloudy glass, and takes the full one from you with the kind of reverence usually reserved for newborn kittens. You set the new jar beneath the coil and hear that familiar plink resume, like a tiny metronome guiding the entire room. Now comes the bottling stage. Not the fancy, decorative bottles people imagine when they think of rosewater, but the practical storage jars used in kitchens, perfumeries, and apothecaries. You're led to a long wooden counter lined with vessels, squat clay jugs, tall glass bottles, and even a few ornate containers reserved for premium customers. Ottoman markets were surprisingly segmented, different grades of rosewater depending on purity, distillation stage, and even which district the roses came from. A mainstream historical note surfaces in your mind. The empire's rosewater trade was so extensive that some regions paid taxes directly in rose products. Imagine filing your taxes in bottled scent. Strangely tempting. A worker hands you a funnel made of tin, dented in places but polished from years of use. You position it over a clay jar and slowly pour the still warm rosewater from the distillation jar. The scent rises in a soft cloud, surrounding your face. It's richer now, sweet, slightly honeyed, with a clean brightness that makes you feel as if the air itself is stretching awake. You pour slowly, trying not to splash, though one tiny drip escapes and lands on your wrist. You smell like luxury now, at least in the 17th century Ottoman sense. Around you, workers begin whispering about the day's buyers. You catch snatches of gossip as petals rustle and jars clink. A palace bakery wants extra strong rosewater for a special dessert. A merchant demands a weaker blend to stretch his profits. A wealthy household has placed a secret order for rosewater known to be used in skincare rituals. You also hear a quirky rumor about one noble family who insisted their rosewater be filtered through silk dyed a very specific shade of pale blue, supposedly to enhance clarity. Historians still argue whether this actually improved the product or simply became an expensive inside joke among palace staff. You wipe the funnel clean and move to the next bottle. This one is clear glass, thinner, prettier. As you pour, the liquid catches the lamplight, glowing faintly gold. Workers sometimes joked that the best batches looked like melted sunlight. You swirl the jar, watching the way light bends inside it, and you feel strangely proud, even though you've done maybe 6% of the actual work. Once enough bottles are filled, another worker steps in to cork them. He uses a small wooden mallet to tap each cork into place, firmly but gently enough not to crack the glass. You notice how the bottles emit a soft thup sound as the cork seals, and each one feels like the closing of a miniature chapter in the kitchen's daily rhythm. To your left, someone packs finished jars into woven baskets cushioned with straw. These baskets will go straight to the market stalls, where vendors line them up in neat rows under striped awnings. You picture the bustling Ottoman market, sellers shouting prices, donkeys clopping over stone paths, traders haggling with dramatic sighs, and in the midst of all that chaos, tiny bottles of rosewater quietly being exchanged like the empire's most polite currency. The master distiller walks past you, inspecting your work with a serious nod. The nod means you haven't embarrassed him or yourself yet. You relax a little. Your arms smell like roses. Your clothes smell like roses. You're pretty sure your soul now also smells like roses. And as another basket is tied shut with cord, you hear the distant, steady crackle of the hearth behind you, reminding you that the kitchen isn't finished, not yet. The fires still burn, the still is still dripping, and the room is ready to shift into its slow evening rituals.
Evening settles over the kitchen in a gentle hush, as if the entire building exhales after the long, fragrant day. You feel it instantly, the shift in rhythm, the slowing of steps, the way conversations soften into near whispers. The last jars have been corked, the baskets prepared for delivery, and now the workers turn their attention to something less glamorous but oddly soothing, cleaning up the rosewater kitchen so it can greet tomorrow with the same calm readiness. You're guided back toward the copper still, where the fire glows low and tired, like it's been awake far longer than it would prefer. A worker hands you a long iron hook with a charred wooden handle. Your job: help settle the fire into its final embers. You crouch beside the hearth, the warmth wrapping around you like a sleepy hug, and gently shift the logs so they settle deeper into the ash. Small sparks flicker upward, soft, harmless, almost playful. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind as you work. Ottoman kitchens often kept a mother ember alive overnight, a smoldering coal tucked deep in the ashes so the next day's fire could be started quickly. You help scrape the ash aside until you see a single glowing coal, no larger than a bead, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. A quirky tradition unfolds beside you. One of the apprentices takes a pinch of rose petals, scraps from sorting, and sprinkles them onto the dying fire. He whispers that it keeps the kitchen's spirit sweet. Another worker mutters that it simply masks the smell of smoke. As always, both explanations feel equally plausible in a place where scent is practically a religion. Somewhere in the faint drifting aromas, you swear you smell a hint of caramel, or maybe that's just your imagination getting cozy. You help wipe down the copper still next. A soft cloth, dampened with warm water, glides across the metal's surface. Each stroke reveals more shine, more reflections of the dimming kitchen lanterns. You polish the lid, then the coils, feeling the metal cool under your fingertips. Historians still argue whether polishing copper between batches was done for purity, aesthetics, or simply because idle hands in a kitchen full of fire and boiling liquid were considered a dangerous idea. You suspect the truth might be all three. The workers move in a slow, looping pattern, sweeping petals into baskets, stacking empty jars, hanging cloths near the hearth to dry. You join in, sweeping a little trail of petal fragments from beneath the table. They rustle under the broom like paper confetti, remnants of a long, fragrant festival. Now the lights dim further. Someone opens a high window, letting in cool night air that brushes across your cheeks. It carries the distant sound of market stalls closing, the clatter of shutters, and the rhythmic clop of a passing horse. The entire city seems to be settling, sinking into its nighttime exhale. One of the workers gestures for you to help tidy the baskets of rose stems saved for tomorrow's fire. You stack them neatly, the dried stems making a brittle crackle that feels almost musical against the quiet. The air cools, the scents mellow, and the kitchen itself seems to loosen its grip on the day. You give the counter a final wipe, smoothing your palm over its well-worn grain. The table that greeted you at dawn with piles of petals now sits empty, peaceful, almost meditative. It's funny how a place can go from bustling to serene so gracefully, like it knows exactly how to wind down without anyone instructing it. A soft lantern glow pools across the floor as the master distiller returns to check the last details. He nods once, approval, permission, closure. The fires settle into silence. The copper cools. The scent of roses lingers just enough to follow you like a calm shadow. And with that, the kitchen drifts into the hush of night, ready for rest, just like you. The warmth of the hearth fades slowly as you step back from the stillness of the room, letting the quiet gather around your shoulders like a soft shawl.
The scents that filled the day begin to dissolve into a gentler sweetness, a barely there whisper of roses that drifts peacefully through the cooling air. Every sound grows softer now, the faint ticking of metal, the settling sighs of wood, the distant murmur of the city as it curls into sleep. Your breaths lengthen, your shoulders loosen, the last traces of warmth slip from the stones beneath your feet, leaving behind only comfort, only calm. The workers have already gone, their footsteps fading down the corridor, leaving you alone with the soft glow of a lantern and the slow rhythm of your own breath. You let yourself settle into that rhythm, steady and quiet, the way a drifting petal settles on still water. The kitchen around you blurs gently into shadow. The polished copper catches the final shimmer of lamplight before dimming into a restful dusk. Everything here feels softened, edges rounding, sounds fading, scents blending into something light and soothing. You feel it wrap around you, easing your mind, quieting the leftover thoughts that try to tug you awake. Let the calm settle deeper. Let the air grow softer. Let the slow weight of rest pull you gently downward. The room holds its final hush, as if it's protecting your quiet moment, as if the night itself has slowed to match your breathing. There's nothing more to do, nothing more to prepare, just the softness, the warmth, the quiet, guiding you effortlessly toward sleep.